Now we're going to switch to our second guest, who is Dave Fernald, and he is waiting patiently here on the other side of the table, so to speak. And Dave, thanks for coming. I'm going to tell a little bit about what I know about you, and then you're going to tell the rest of the story. Dave is a resident of Wildwood Circle in Portland and is a candidate for House District 114, representing East Deering and the Islands. Dave has a professional background in computer hardware and software and business management. So Dave, let's, like we did with Jeff, start with you taking an opportunity to expand on what I just said about you and your background, and tell us how that helped you decide to get into this race.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. I came about deciding to get in this race over a long period of time. I'm a resident of Maine. I grew up in Maine, in Pittsfield, Maine. I went to school in Maine. And then, because I wanted a career in high technology in the computer business specifically, I left for 30 years. In 1993, my wife and I returned to Maine, having our children having grown up, and what we found when we came back was quite different from what I had left in 1962. So I began to involve myself in various organizations for volunteering in a variety of ways. One would have been the Maine Technology Institute, for example, to bring research and development dollars to help build the economy with small businesses, startups primarily. My interests don't stop there, however, although my main concern would be economics and the economy and jobs and careers. What I'm more interested in is the common good for the state of Maine and its people. It seems to me that Mainers deserve better than they've been getting. And for the past, let's say 30 years or so, what we've had is a building of higher taxes, higher tax burdens, excessive insurance, health and particularly health insurance rates, and I can go into those issues in a moment with you. A very unfriendly business climate. I brought a business to Maine myself and found that the regulations for example, managing things like hazardous waste, which is the software side of the business I was in, were just excessive and unreasonable, and no one really wanted to change much of any of that. So investment capital is another one. Very, very hard to come by, very hard to find. And I said to myself, you know, there's got to be a better way to do all this, and I think I can make a difference, having built thousands of jobs in my careers over the past 30 years. That's why I'm doing this.
Well, good. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned while you were talking.
Sure.
Starting with business regulations. I assume that when you were struggling your way through the business regulation environment here in Maine, you looked at some of our neighboring states and thought and did a comparison with how starting a business would be in one of our nearest neighbors, which would be New Hampshire. Would you care to compare the two?
I would love to compare those two and others. It's alarming to note that when you're running a small business, as I was, we had less than 10 people. The average business in Maine is 10 people, but we had less. That the costs for insurance, the regulations you're obligated to meet on an ongoing basis, the opportunity for investment capital, even at the state level with regulations regarding that type of thing. Those types of things are very, very hard to deal with, and at the same time make yourself an entrepreneur, which you really want to do with new products and new marketing ideas, and reach out to markets that you can't get to. So regulatory problems are bound in Maine.
And how, as a freshman legislator, would you attack that problem?
Well, this goes to my economic strategy, and the first thing that I think we have to have is really a three-pronged attack for getting new jobs and new careers and a better economy in the state. First of all, I think we need to soften the regulatory environment. We have to make it easier for people to do business. We have to make it easier for people to buy insurance, to attract talent to the state of Maine, so that when 18 or so computer science graduates from the University of Maine all leave the state, they would be more attracted to stay in the state and do things in Maine where they'd really rather live. That is kind of platform A. Platform B would be, rather than have these broad sweeping programs where we might attract some number of companies to either move a division or expand in the state. Let's identify 10 of them that ought to be here. For example, what if we were to build a software development laboratory for testing software products? And there are lots of other technologies that we could use, but I'll use that one as an example for the moment. Software testing is a huge business. We have every bit of talent here. We have access to a huge high-tech talent pool only 100 miles away from at least from Portland. And we have an opportunity with the organizations and trade organizations in Maine to build something like that. I could build a similar case for wrapping together composite materials, precision manufacturing, and high technology for design and building of new highly technological boats, ships, ferry services, and so on. There are lots of ways to go at it, but I don't think we can do it through broad sweeping programs. I think we ought to identify a few and go after them and see if we could not put the right incentives in place for real estate development, tax incentives, help with, after all, when anybody comes with a well-paying, high-tech job, they're going to drive $500,000 in infrastructure with that. Every doctor that comes into Maine brings 6 or 7 assistants and people with him or her, and that's a huge opportunity for us in the state. We could build another Mayo Clinic 100 miles from Boston, just as the Mayo Clinic was built 100 miles from St. Paul. There's really nothing stopping us except our will to do so.
I'm glad you moved into that area because I was going to take you back a step. As an employer, you mentioned health insurance. I assume you had to wrestle with the problem of providing your employees with health insurance, and how did you solve those problems, and do we still have ongoing difficulties there?
As an employer, yes, we definitely had problems with health insurance. When we first offered health insurance to our employees, we paid 80% of the premium. Over the course of the next 3 years, we couldn't afford to spend 80% of the premium and had to begin to ratchet that back. Now, at the same time, all the characteristics of what led to the Dirigo program were in place too. One of the biggest regulatory challenges for us in the health area would be to change around this guaranteed community rating and guaranteed issuance regulatory problem that we have in the state today. That in the face of health insurance drove costs up, drove people away from affording health insurance, drove companies out of the state so they couldn't be competitive. So back to my little business trying to offer health insurance to people, it became just far too expensive to do, and we had to cut it out.
So what should we do to reform that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is get at that whole notion of guaranteed issuance. And then I think we need to try to attract companies in a competitive environment for health insurance. And I like the idea of a high risk pool so that those people who really are in need and a higher risk do get cut out of the insurance bucket, if you will, so the normal, if there's any such thing as normal, person can be more effectively rated and can afford health insurance.
Can we take the last few seconds of this segment to ask you to recommend to people why they should vote for you rather than your opponent?
For a number of reasons, sure. I've had experience over the last 30 years in making big decisions and solving very complex problems in a lot of areas, whether it be energy policy or whether for jobs, for health insurance, education, and so on, all the major things that are on everybody's mind. And I think the people of Maine need to look at change and ask for it, change they deserve to have when they haven't had that for such a long time. I am really willing to go to bat for the people of this state, and particularly Maine and my district, and bring the jobs here that we need to bring the careers we need to bring the educational services we need to bring, and so on. We won't solve it all in one day. For example, our energy policy cannot be solved overnight, but we need to do the things we know how to do and know how to do well. And we need to bring the research dollars in, the investment dollars in, and make Maine a state that really is for the common good.
Good. Thank you very much for being here, Dave, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks
it's
again.
A pleasure.